The day I married Ryan, I believed I was joining a family. Looking back, I realize I was simply stepping into a carefully crafted illusion. Ryan and I had been together for 3 years before our wedding. He was charming, attentive, and always knew exactly what to say when I felt uncertain. He came from a wealthy family, while I had grown up in a modest household after losing my parents at a young age. My grandfather had raised me, teaching me the value of hard work, honesty, and kindness. When Grandpa passed away 2 years before my wedding, I was devastated. He was the only family I had left. Ryan stayed by my side through the funeral and the difficult months afterward. That's why I never doubted him. A few weeks after our honeymoon, Ryan surprised me. "We're moving into one of my family's apartments," he announced with a smile. My eyes widened. "Really?" He nodded proudly. "Mom and Dad own several properties. One of them is vacant. They'll let us live there." I felt incredibly lucky. The apartment was beautiful. It sat on the top floor of a modern building downtown. Sunlight poured through floor-to-ceiling windows. The kitchen looked like something from a luxury magazine, and the balcony overlooked the city skyline. The moment I stepped inside, I thought I was dreaming. "Ryan, this place is amazing." He wrapped an arm around my waist. "Welcome home." I thanked his parents repeatedly, especially Linda, my mother-in-law smiled every time I expressed gratitude. "Oh, Emily," she'd say sweetly, "we're happy to help family." At the time, I thought she meant it. I couldn't have been more wrong. The problem started slowly. Linda had a habit of showing up without warning. Sometimes she'd arrive early in the morning. Other times she'd let herself in while I was cooking dinner. At first, I tried to be polite. After all, it was supposedly her family's apartment. But her visits became more frequent and more intrusive. One afternoon, I returned from work to find Linda rearranging my living room furniture. I stood frozen in the doorway. "What are you doing?" She glanced at me casually. "Improving the layout." I blinked. Without asking me, Linda laughed. "Oh, sweetheart, don't be so sensitive." Sensitive, that became her favorite word whenever I objected to something. When she criticized my cooking, I was sensitive. When she commented on my clothes, I was sensitive. When she walked into my bedroom without knocking, I was sensitive. Ryan never defended me, not once. "That's just how Mom is," he'd say. I grew tired of hearing those words. One evening, I finally confronted him. We were sitting on the couch watching television when I muted the screen. "We need to talk." Ryan sighed immediately. "What now?" I hated that response. "What now?" As if my concerns were inconveniences. "Your mother doesn't respect boundaries." He rubbed his forehead. "Emily, please." "No." I folded my arms. "She comes here whenever she wants. She criticizes everything I do, and you always take her side." Ryan stood up. "Because you're making a big deal out of nothing." His words hit me harder than I expected. Nothing. Apparently, my feelings were nothing. I went to bed that night feeling more alone than I had since Grandpa died. Things only got worse. A month later, Linda began dropping strange comments. Comments about responsibility, about contributing, about earning your place. At family dinners, she'd stare directly at me. People appreciate things more when they pay for them. Everyone would laugh except me. I never understood what she meant until one Saturday afternoon. The memory is still crystal clear. I had spent the morning cleaning the apartment. Ryan was out golfing with friends. Around noon, Linda appeared at the door. She carried a leather folder under one arm. Without waiting for an invitation, she walked inside. "We need to discuss something important." My stomach tightened. Her tone immediately worried me. I gestured toward the dining table. "Okay." Linda sat down. I sat across from her. For several seconds, she said nothing. Then she opened the folder. Inside was a stack of papers. She slid them toward me. I glanced down. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. Then my eyes landed on a number. $1,800 monthly rent. I stared at the page, then at her, then back at the page. "I'm sorry," I said slowly. "What is this?" Linda folded her hands. "Your rent agreement." I laughed nervously, thinking it had to be some kind of joke. She didn't laugh. My smile disappeared. "Wait." I pushed the papers away. "Rent, yes. For who? For you." The room suddenly felt smaller. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "What do you mean for me?" Linda's expression hardened. "It means exactly what it says." I shook my head. "I live here with Ryan." "Correct. And this apartment belongs to the family." "Correct." I frowned. "So why am I paying rent?" Linda leaned forward. "Because Ryan is my son." I stared at her. And family is family. The meaning hit me instantly. My chest tightened. "You don't expect Ryan to pay?" "No." The answer came without hesitation. My disbelief turned into anger. "Then why am I the only one being charged?" Linda smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of someone who believed they held all the power. "Because you're the one who married into this family." I felt heat rush to my face. "That's ridiculous." "Is it?" "Yes." She pointed at the contract. "If you want to continue living here, you'll sign." For several seconds, neither of us spoke. I couldn't process what was happening. After everything I'd done to be accepted, after every holiday meal, every birthday gift, every effort to belong, Linda still viewed me as an outsider, a tenant, someone who needed to earn the right to stay. I swallowed hard. "What does Ryan think about this?" Linda's smile widened. That answer terrified me before she even spoke. "We've already discussed it." My heart sank. "What?" She nodded calmly. "Ryan agrees." The words felt like a punch to the stomach. I stared at her in complete shock. Ryan knew. Ryan had agreed, and neither of them had bothered telling me. As Linda rose from her chair, she left the contract in front of me. "I'll give you 3 days to sign." She headed toward the door, then paused. Without turning around, she delivered one final blow. "And Emily," my voice barely worked. "What?" Linda glanced over her shoulder. "If you can't afford the rent, perhaps this apartment isn't the right place for you." Then she walked out, leaving me alone at the table, staring at a rent agreement for the apartment I called home. And for the first time, I began to wonder if the people I trusted most had been lying to me all along. I sat at the dining table long after Linda left. The rent agreement remained exactly where she had placed it. 3 days. That was the deadline she had given me. 3 days to start paying $1,800 a month to live in the apartment I shared with my husband. The more I thought about it, the more absurd it sounded. Yet what hurt most wasn't the money. It was Ryan. The fact that he had already discussed it with his mother and agreed without ever mentioning it to me. I spent the rest of the afternoon staring out the balcony window, trying to make sense of everything. By the time Ryan came home, I had rehearsed 100 different conversations in my head. None of them prepared me for his response. He walked through the door carrying his golf bag. "Hey, babe." I folded my arms. "We need to talk." His smile faded immediately. "Mom came by, didn't she?" That answer told me everything. He knew exactly why I was upset. "Yes," I replied coldly. And she showed me the rent agreement. Ryan set down his bag. Instead of looking guilty, he looked annoyed. "Emily, don't make this bigger than it is." My jaw dropped. "Bigger than it is. It's just rent." I laughed in disbelief. "Just rent. Your mother wants me to pay nearly $2,000 a month. You have a good job." The words hit me like a slap. "That's not the point." Ryan sighed dramatically. "Then what is the point?" I stared at him. "The point is that your mother is treating me like a stranger." "No, she's not. Really." I shot back. Because she's not charging you. Ryan looked away. That silence answered everything. For the first time since our marriage, I felt a crack forming between us. A deep crack, the kind that couldn't be repaired with apologies. Over the next few days, Linda's behavior became unbearable. She called constantly, texted constantly, reminded me constantly. One morning, I received a message before I even arrived at work. Just a reminder, 2 days left, the next day came another. I hope you've made the responsible decision. Responsible, as if refusing to be exploited made me irresponsible. By the third day, I was exhausted, not from work, not from the apartment, from constantly being treated like I didn't belong. That weekend, Ryan insisted we attend a family dinner. I didn't want to go, but refusing would only create more drama. So I went. The moment we arrived, I knew something was wrong. Linda was unusually cheerful. Her husband, George, barely looked at me. Ryan's sister, Megan, kept exchanging strange glances with her mother. It felt like everyone knew something I didn't. Dinner began normally enough. Small talk, work updates, vacation plans. Then Linda struck. "So, Emily," she said sweetly. I immediately recognized the tone. The fake sweetness, the one she used right before causing trouble. "Yes." She sipped her wine. "Have you signed the agreement yet?" The table fell silent. My stomach dropped. She was doing this publicly. Everyone was watching, waiting. I forced a smile. "No." Linda raised an eyebrow. "No." I shook my head. "No." A few uncomfortable glances passed around the table. Then Linda laughed softly. "Well, that's surprising." I clenched my fork. "Why?" "Because adults understand responsibilities." There it was. The insult disguised as advice. Ryan stared at his plate, said nothing, again. I looked directly at him. Waiting, hoping, begging silently for him to defend me. He didn't. Not a single word. That hurt more than Linda's comments ever could. After dinner, I escaped to the backyard for fresh air. My chest felt tight, my eyes burned. I hated crying, especially over people like Linda. But I was reaching my limit. A few minutes later, George stepped outside. Ryan's father rarely spoke to me. In fact, he rarely spoke to anyone when Linda was around. Tonight seemed different. He approached slowly. "You okay?" I nodded. "Fine." He gave me a look that suggested he knew I was lying. Then he surprised me. "Your grandfather was a good man." I blinked. The comment seemed completely random. "My grandfather," George nodded. "He cared about you." I smiled sadly. He did. For a moment, he looked like he wanted to say something more. Something important. But then the back door opened. Linda appeared. George immediately went silent. The moment disappeared. Later that night, we returned home. I couldn't stop thinking about what George had said. Your grandfather was a good man. Why bring him up now? Why mention him at all? The question lingered in my mind for days. A week later, I decided to clean out a storage closet I had been avoiding. Most of the boxes belonged to my late grandfather. After he passed away, I'd stored many of his belongings without sorting through them. The memories were too painful. Now I needed a distraction, anything to keep my mind off Linda and Ryan. Dust covered nearly every box. Old photographs, letters, tax documents, family keepsakes. Hours passed. Then I found a small wooden box hidden beneath several folders. I immediately recognized it. It had belonged to Grandpa. He kept important papers inside. My heart tightened as I opened it. The familiar smell of old paper filled the air. Inside were photographs, handwritten notes, and legal documents. Most were years old. I almost closed the box. Then something caught my attention. A folded envelope. My name was written across the front in Grandpa's handwriting. My hands trembled. Slowly, I opened it. Inside was a short letter. "Emily, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone." Tears instantly filled my eyes. I continued reading. "There are things I wanted to explain in person, but never had the chance. Everything important is protected. The documents are where they need to be. Trust the truth, not what people tell you." I frowned. What did that mean? The documents? What documents? Confused, I searched through the rest of the box. Most of the papers seemed ordinary. Bank statements, insurance records, property records. I paused. Then I pulled out a thick folder. The cover contained an address that made my heart stop. It was my address, the apartment. The exact apartment where Ryan and I lived. My pulse began racing. Slowly, I opened the folder. Pages filled with legal language stared back at me. Ownership records, transfer forms, signatures, dates. I didn't fully understand what I was looking at, but one thing became immediately clear. These weren't random papers. These documents were connected to the apartment. The same apartment Linda claimed belonged to her family. The same apartment she was demanding rent for. A chill ran down my spine. Suddenly, George's strange comment made sense. Your grandfather was a good man. It hadn't been random at all. He had been trying to tell me something important, something Linda clearly didn't want me to know. As I sat surrounded by papers, a realization slowly formed in my mind. For weeks, I had believed Linda was abusing power she rightfully possessed. But what if she didn't possess that power at all? What if the biggest lie wasn't the rent agreement? What if the apartment itself wasn't what they claimed it was? And for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something replacing my hurt. Not sadness, not fear, determination. Because I was finally starting to uncover a secret that someone had worked very hard to keep hidden. The moment I finished reading the documents, I knew I couldn't rely on assumptions. I needed facts, real facts, not Ryan's version, not Linda's version, the truth. The next morning, I called in sick to work. Then I gathered every document from Grandpa's wooden box and drove straight to a law office recommended by an old family friend. My hands trembled the entire drive. Part of me feared I was misunderstanding everything. Maybe the papers were outdated. Maybe they were unrelated. Maybe I was desperately searching for hope where none existed. Still, I had to know. The attorney, Mr. Harris, was a calm man in his 60s with silver hair and kind eyes. He spent nearly an hour reviewing every page. I sat silently across from him, watching, waiting, praying. Finally, he removed his glasses. His expression was unreadable. "Mrs. Carter," he said carefully. My heart pounded. "Yes, where exactly did you get these documents?" "They belong to my grandfather, Mr." Harris nodded slowly. Then he said the last thing I expected. "Your grandfather was very thorough." I blinked. "What does that mean?" He folded his hands. "It means these records are legitimate." My pulse quickened. "What records?" He slid one document toward me. "This apartment." I stared at him. "What about it?" The attorney looked directly into my eyes. "You are the legal owner." For a moment I couldn't breathe. The room seemed to spin. What, Mr. Harris pointed to several pages. "Your grandfather purchased the property years ago through a trust." I stared at the papers. "Unable to speak?" "He transferred ownership to you before his death." I felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath me. "No." The word escaped before I could stop it. "It can't be." Mr. Harris smiled gently. "It absolutely can." My eyes filled with tears. Not from sadness, from shock. For weeks, Linda had treated me like an unwanted guest. For weeks, Ryan had allowed it. For weeks, they had demanded rent, all while I legally owned the apartment. The apartment had been mine the entire time. Mr. Harris continued explaining. Apparently, Grandpa had established a trust years earlier. The property was protected. The ownership transfer had been completed legally and properly. Everything had been documented. Everything had been recorded. Everything belonged to me. When I finally left the office, I sat in my car for nearly 20 minutes, trying to process reality. Then something else occurred to me. If the ownership records were public, why didn't Linda know, or worse, did she know? The possibility sent a chill through my body. I spent the next several days digging deeper. With Mr. Harris's help, I obtained additional records, emails, property histories, transfer filings. The more information I gathered, the more disturbing this situation became. Someone had clearly assumed I would never examine the paperwork. Someone had counted on my ignorance. Someone had been very comfortable pretending the apartment belonged to them. That realization made me furious, but I stayed quiet, very quiet, because now I had something far more valuable than anger. I had proof. Meanwhile, Linda continued her campaign. Every few days she called. Every few days she texted. Every few days she found a new way to remind me about the rent. One afternoon, she even appeared at my office. I nearly dropped my coffee when I saw her standing in the lobby. She smiled the moment she spotted me. "Emily, what are you doing here?" Her smile widened. "I wanted to check on you." I almost laughed. "No, you didn't." Her expression hardened slightly. "I've been very patient. Patient." The woman demanding rent from the apartment owner claimed she was being patient. The irony was almost unbelievable. "I've had a lot to think about," I said carefully. Linda seemed pleased. "Good." She stepped closer. "I knew you'd eventually make the right decision." If only she knew. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't intimidated by her. I wasn't hurt by her. I wasn't afraid of her, because the balance of power had already shifted. She simply didn't know it yet. A few days later, Ryan approached me while I was making dinner. Mom's planning a family gathering next weekend. I continued chopping vegetables. "Okay." He looked surprised by my calm response. "You'll come, right?" I glanced at him. "Why wouldn't I?" Ryan hesitated. I could tell he expected another argument, another confrontation, another emotional discussion. Instead, I smiled. A genuine smile, and that seemed to make him nervous. The truth was simple. I wanted to attend, very much. Because by then, Mr. Harris had finalized everything I needed. Certified ownership records, official trust documents, property deeds, transfer confirmations, every piece of evidence imaginable. The truth was sitting safely inside a folder in my desk. Waiting patiently, the following week passed quickly. Linda became increasingly confident, almost smug. Apparently, she believed she had won. Apparently, she believed I would eventually surrender. Then came the phone call. The one that confirmed exactly what she had planned. "Emily," Linda said cheerfully, "yes. I'd like you to bring the signed rental agreement to dinner." I nearly smiled. Dinner, of course. She intended to make a spectacle of it, a public submission, a final humiliation. The same way she had embarrassed me before, only this time things would be different, sure, I replied. Her voice brightened, wonderful. After hanging up, I stared at my phone. Then I laughed, not because anything was funny, because for the first time I could see the ending. Linda thought she was inviting me to surrender. In reality, she was inviting me to expose her. The night before the family gathering, I sat alone on the balcony. The city lights shimmered below. The apartment felt different now, not because anything had changed physically, but because I finally knew the truth. This wasn't Ryan's family property. This wasn't Linda's property. This wasn't a favor. This wasn't charity. This was my home, my grandfather's final gift. And the people who should have respected that gift had instead tried to profit from it. I thought about Grandpa, About his letter. Trust the truth, not what people tell you. At last I understood. He had known, maybe not the details, maybe not the people involved, but he had known that truth matters. And tomorrow the truth was finally going to walk into that family dinner, in a folder with my name on every page. And when it did, the secret Linda had built her power upon was about to collapse in front of everyone. The house felt unusually perfect that evening. Too perfect. The dining table was set with expensive plates, polished silverware, and wine glasses that caught the light like crystals. Linda had clearly gone out of her way to create an atmosphere of control, elegant, structured, and staged. A stage for her performance. Ryan and I arrived together. He seemed tense, checking his phone repeatedly as if expecting something to go wrong. I, on the other hand, felt strangely calm, because I already knew exactly how this night would end. Linda greeted us at the door with a bright smile. "Emily," she said sweetly, hugging me a little too tightly. "I'm glad you came." I returned the smile, of course. Her eyes lingered on me a moment longer than usual, searching for hesitation, fear, anything that would suggest I had signed the agreement. She found nothing. That confused her, but she said nothing. Dinner began with the usual forced conversation. Megan talked about her new job. George remained quiet. Ryan barely touched his food, and Linda, she waited. She always waited for the right moment. Halfway through the meal, she set her wine glass down gently. The sound was deliberate. The room immediately quieted. Before we finished dinner, she said, folding her hands, "There's something important we need to address." Ryan exhaled sharply beside me. I stayed still. Linda turned toward me with that familiar, controlling smile. "Emily, have you brought the rent agreement?" There it was. The moment she had been preparing for. The public humiliation. Ryan looked at me quickly, almost nervously, as if expecting me to apologize, explain, or break down. Instead, I calmly reached into my handbag. Linda's smile widened slightly. She thought I was complying. She thought I was surrendering. I placed a folder on the table, right in the center. Linda leaned forward. "Good," she said, finally being responsible. Ryan shifted uncomfortably, but I said nothing. Linda opened the folder. Her eyes scanned the first page. At first, her expression didn't change. Then she frowned. She turned the page. And another, her smile began to fade. "What is this?" she asked sharply. I leaned back slightly in my chair. "The rent agreement you wanted," I said softly. Her eyes narrowed. "This is not a rent agreement." "No," I replied. "It's not." A confusion spread across the table. Ryan leaned forward. "Emily, what are you doing?" I didn't look at him. "Not yet." Linda flipped another page, her hands becoming less steady. Her voice rose. "These are property documents." "Yes," I said. Her eyes snapped up. "Where did you get these?" That was my moment. The room felt like it had stopped breathing. Slowly, I met her gaze. From my grandfather, silence. A heavy, suffocating silence. Linda scoffed. "Your grandfather has nothing to do with this apartment." I nodded slightly. "Actually, he does." I reached forward and gently tapped the top page. "This apartment is legally mine." The words hit the room like a shockwave. Ryan froze. Megan blinked in disbelief. George lowered his eyes. Linda stared at me as if I had just spoken in another language. Then she laughed. A sharp, dismissive sound. "That's ridiculous." I remained calm. "It's documented." She pushed the folder toward me. "This apartment belongs to our family." I shook my head. "No." Her voice sharpened. "Yes, it does." I finally looked at Ryan. He avoided my eyes. That told me everything I needed to know. He had known something wasn't right, but he had chosen silence. I turned back to Linda. "Did you ever check the deed?" Her face tightened. "Of course I did." I tilted my head. "Then you would know. It was transferred to me years ago." The color drained slightly from her face. But she recovered quickly. That can't be real. I opened my purse again. This time, I pulled out the certified legal documents from Mr. Harris, stamped, verified, official. I placed them beside the folder. One of these is a copy, I said calmly. The other is the original record from the registry. Linda didn't touch them. She didn't want to, but she had no choice. Slowly, she picked up the papers. Her eyes moved faster now, scanning, searching for loopholes, denial. But there were none, because truth doesn't need permission to exist. Ryan finally spoke. Emily, why didn't you tell us? I looked at him, not with anger, not with tears, with clarity. You had every opportunity to ask. He flinched. Linda slammed the papers down. This is some kind of trick. I exhaled softly, no. Then I said the line that ended everything. You've been charging rent on my own property. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the air felt still. Linda's face tightened with fury, embarrassment, and disbelief all at once. That's impossible, she snapped. We've owned this building for years. I shook my head. No, you've been collecting rent from a property you never owned. Megan whispered, oh my God. George closed his eyes. Ryan looked like the ground beneath him had disappeared. Linda stood abruptly. This is nonsense. But her voice cracked slightly. For the first time, she was losing control, and she knew it. I rose slowly from my chair, not aggressively, not emotionally, just steadily. I placed both hands on the table and looked at everyone. This apartment is legally mine. I repeated, it has always been mine. Then I turned toward Ryan. I just didn't know I was living with people who were charging me for it. Ryan swallowed hard. I didn't know. You didn't ask. I interrupted gently. That shut him down completely. Linda grabbed her bag. This isn't over. I nodded slightly. It is. She froze. I continued. You can't charge rent on something you don't own. Her breathing became uneven. She looked around the table for support. No one gave it. Not even Ryan. That was the moment she realized she had lost. Not just the argument. Not just the apartment, but the illusion of control she had built her entire identity on. I gathered my documents and slid them back into my folder. Then I looked at Linda one last time. I think it's time you stopped treating my home like it belongs to you. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. For once, she had nothing left to say. I turned toward the door, and as I walked away, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace, not because I had won, but because the truth had finally spoken louder than their lies.